How is everybody? Did anyone notice that the Batchelor family was gone a couple weeks? Did you notice something else is gone? It's fun because I haven't had my mustache off in years. I told Sabbath school class about this already, but some of you missed that. And I forget that it's not there, and people look at me and it's like, I'm going, what's wrong? So I just want to get it out of the way. Yes, I've shaved my mustache off. I don't know what came over me. But we'll see what happens. I'll probably have a beard next week. I'm going through a midlife crisis. Anyway, this last week, the last couple weeks, the Batchelor family had a little vacation. We mixed it with some ministry. And I'll just tell you, it's probably, next to the honeymoon, it's probably one of the best vacations we've ever had. It was really nice, refreshing, a lot of excursions and excitement. One of the principal reasons for the trip was Karen and I and the boys, matter of fact, all the boys are certified, including Daniel, scuba diving. Nathan, Daniel, Stephen. Daniel too. It's like this all the time. Anyway, so we wanted to go, and we hadn't done it lately, wanted to do some scuba diving. And it was really neat. We prayed for decent weather, and we had some weather. And I've been thinking a lot about spiritual applications because there's a whole nother world under there that people don't know about. Hence the sermon title today, Wonders in the Deep. And that's based upon passage that you find in the book of Psalms. Matter of fact, I think we read this not too long ago when we were talking about Paul's shipwreck. Psalms 107, verse 23. Those who go down in the sea in ships, who do business on the great waters, they see the works of the Lord and his wonders in the deep. You know, the waters abound with life. That was in our scripture reading. When God first created the world, part of the fourth or fifth day was really filling the oceans with life. Let the waters abound with an abundance of living creatures. Let the birds of the air fly above the water across the face of the firmament. So God created great sea creatures. Going to talk about that a little bit. And every living thing that moves, with which the waters abounded according to their kind. Now I've got a theory, and I can't prove it, but you probably can't prove I'm wrong, so I'm going to share it. Since at least 50%, maybe more than 50% of the life on this planet is below the waters, I think Adam and Eve were able to somehow enter that world before sin. Something happened to our bodies. There were some limitations we all know about. You know, there's a lot of creatures like penguins and others that they can see above water clearly and they can see below water clearly because they got this extra lens or something that goes over their eyes. And I don't know how they did it, but I thought Adam could probably hold his breath a lot longer. And, well, you can put up that picture now. Let the waters abound. There we go. I thought that was such a beautiful picture. That they could see underneath the waters. Now, the closest you're going to get to heaven, in my opinion, this side of heaven, is if you're off in the waters. Scuba diving's better than snorkeling because you don't have to worry about going up and down for air. And you're down at a coral reef. One of the Pacific reefs are the prettiest I've seen, but there are also some very pretty reefs in the Gulf. And there's very gentle currents that kind of wave back and forth. And you see all these different coral that are, they're red and they're purple and they're white and they're blue and they're green. And all these fish that are all these fluorescent, exotic, cosmic colors. They're like hummingbirds. They're iridescent. And they're moving back and forth through these coral. And you are flying over it. The water has to be warm. So if it's going to feel heavenly, it's not just enough. Everything I just mentioned, if you're in cold water, it kind of ruins it. But if you've got a wetsuit on, you're comfortable, and you can fly over that, it's like flying. They've got fish called angelfish. It's like flying with angels. And it's pretty neat. I mean, I don't know how you can be an atheist and swim amongst all that beauty. It's really exhilarating. It's really very, very pretty. I enjoy it quite a bit. And so we did some of this, but it's another world. And the deeper you go, the more foreign the field. Now, that's also true if you go up. There's a very narrow ribbon in which men thrive. Matter of fact, going to Mount Everest, only one or two people, it might be more than one or two, just a handful of people have climbed Mount Everest without oxygen. They needed to take equipment with them to get there. One of my desires, you've heard me say probably ad nauseum, I want to go to space. I know I will eventually. I mean, it'd be fun to go to the space station, and I can't watch a launch without feeling some envy. I'd love to be up there in space and just to see all the stars. But you need special equipment. Well, if you're going to enter that other world down below today with our bodies that have been handicapped by sin, you need some special equipment. Now, I've invited a friend here. You can put the space picture up now. The thing in the equipment in the studio is not working completely. Hey, John? All right, he's coming out. Do we have an extra microphone? Ricky, get me an extra handheld microphone, please. I've invited a friend, John Salas, Seventh-day Adventist brother, who lives in Sacramento, who is a diver. And he's willing to come out and to help us with some illustrations. Wow, I hadn't seen him yet. That's really impressive. Now, if you've got your regulator in, hi, John, how you doing? I'll let you take that out for just a second, and that's going to fog up. John Salas, now tell me, you've got some certifications in diving, right?
I do.
That's correct. Tell me what you have.
Well, I can teach just about every level of scuba diving, minus cave diving.
Okay.
We have an extreme world of caves out there, and while I do a lot of cave diving, I do not teach cave diving, but everything...
But you're certified for cave diving?
I am, yes.
And you are a master diver?
Yeah.
So
yes.
you teach it. We'll talk a little bit about that. Now, to go to that world, are there certain risks if you don't have the right equipment?
A lot. And certainly we have a lot of gear, too.
All right. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions here, and you can maybe tell us a little bit about some of the equipment. First of all, you got a suit on. This is a dry suit, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
You can get warm today?
I'm hot already.
I won't keep you out here the whole sermon. So you got, part of the reason for a suit is, I guess, temperature control.
That's correct.
And sometimes you might even run into a jellyfish every now and then.
Indeed. And that can sting you really bad, especially even if you have a suit on, you can get stung on the face or the hands or those areas.
We've had that before in our family.
The goatee helps out quite a bit.
So the beard, I got to grow my mustache back is what you're telling me?
Get stung on the lips, that's not good.
Now, how do you breathe underwater?
Well, you have a regulator and attached to the scuba tank, and that regulates the air pressure in the scuba tank and then allows us to breathe. The deeper that we go, the breathing, because there's so much pressure on your body, it does get a little bit more difficult. And especially if you're exerting yourself in a strong current or have a shark chasing you, as people always like to ask.
Yeah. Now, well, I'm just curious. I didn't ask you on the phone. How deep have you gone?
Over 400 feet.
Ooh, that's deep, trust me. Wow. Where was that? What body of water?
We were up in British Columbia.
Cold water.
Very cold.
Wow.
Under 40 degrees.
Now, you've got, of course, the air's in the tank and it's pressurized.
Correct.
And then coming out of the tank, you've got a few different tubes. One is your primary regulator, which is what you had there. And this is the variety, if I'm not mistaken, you're breathing, you have bubbles.
Correct.
That come up.
Yes.
But you've even got what they call a rebreather, so you can go in caves without creating bubbles.
Correct. And that's more of a military apparatus where the military doesn't want bubbles if they're doing specific activities. And but also within the realm of shipwreck diving, extreme shipwreck diving or cave diving, it's important to have less bubbles, or helpful to have less bubbles, because of the amount of rust that can come down. You can actually dislodge big sections of rock or shipwreck.
And even among some fish, you don't want to disturb them, so the bubbles kind of keep them a little calmer if you're doing some special work.
Or videography, yes.
All right. And then now you've got an extra regulator.
I do.
What's that for? I'll let you put your flippers down. Everyone know what the flippers are for? Okay.
So my extra regulator, if I'm diving with Doug here, and he gets in a panic situation, he runs out of air, and maybe he's just being real extreme and kicking me and hitting me, so I want to get him as far away as possible from me so I can give him that regulator, and he can swim along all by himself over there, but yet still have enough
I won't
air.
be putting this in my mouth because doctor says these sores in my mouth might be contagious.
Nope.
So, and so when you're underwater, and sometimes your buddy might run out of air or something could go wrong with your equipment. And all of a sudden your regulator, very rarely happens, but a regulator diaphragm or something could go out. And then you signal each other, you got an emergency.
Out of air,
Yeah.
body breathe.
Yeah. And I might mention while you're doing that, the divers use different signals because unless you got a special radio intercom, you've got to use hand signals.
And I think that's one of the nice things because we're so used to talk all the time. And like you mentioned, and I definitely feel diving in the ocean can only be close to heaven. But that's one of the most important parts to me is just how peaceful and quiet it is. So we have to do a lot of communication, hand
Right.
signals.
And I'll let you hold this here for a second. If I remember right, so when you first go in the water, you tell a person you're okay. You give them the okay sign. And as you're going around the coral reef, if you see different animals, they got different symbols for like, that's a
Lobster. Possibly.
lobster. Yeah, we haven't gone over this in barracuda.
Barracuda.
This is,
The shark for sure.
you know what great white shark is?
And, well, and to follow up with that, people always ask, well, how come you don't have a bigger knife? And really, that's why you have a knife, or you have larger fins, so you stab your dive buddy when a shark's chasing you. As long as you can outswim your dive buddy, you're
That's
good.
right. Okay, and so signals are important for that. Now you've got some computers here,
Correct.
some gauges.
And this really is our main, outside of this brain, this is our second
Go
brain.
ahead, keep your mic, use your mic real close.
And this helps us to chart how long we can stay down a dive. The deeper that we go, the shorter time frame that we have, depending on the gas that we're breathing, that we can stay down. If we were to be doing a dive at, say, 200 feet for 30 minutes, that's a very extremely long dive, and we would have almost 3 times the length of time, probably 90 or 100 minutes, to come back up to the surface in what they called stage stops. And the computer helps us chart those stops specifically.
Yeah, maybe I should give a layman's version of what that means. When you're breathing compressed air, you ever flown in an airplane, you take a drink up high, when you land your bottle is expanded and it pops or it's crunched depending on where you took the drink. That happens in your bloodstream when you're breathing compressed air. So if you go down and you're breathing compressed air, you need to come up slowly and give the nitrogen a chance to escape from your tissue, or can cause the bends or even kill you. So you need to control your ascent. There's some dangers if you're not careful. Use those gauges.
Correct.
That's your Bible when you're down there.
Pretty much.
And do you also have a compass?
I do. It's right on the back side, and that's the other most important thing is your air gauge, knowing how much air you have in your scuba tank, but right on the back side of my air gauge is my compass, and that gives me the direction in and out.
Sometimes
or-
water currents, you don't know which way you're going. And if you're out in the deep sea, if you're down 50 feet and you don't have any landmarks and the current's carrying you, you could be swimming a totally different direction from the boat. You've heard about divers that got separated from their boats. It's easy to, you need a compass. Let me see, what else can we talk about? This, you got a vest on. Now, I'm just curious, how much does what you're wearing weigh?
This is the light amount of gear, probably about 125 pounds.
We're not going to keep him out here long. And he was going to bring both of his tanks. This is his one small tank. Is that right?
That's correct. Thanks for letting me do that.
So you got a vest on. BC or BCD?
I don't know if everybody can see that kind of inflating there.
Yeah. Makes interesting noises.
So the BC, do you want me to explain?
Go
a
ahead,
little bit? One of the most important things is the further we go down with more compression on our suit, our bodies, and so forth, we lose buoyancy. So we have to add buoyancy back to maintain a certain level underwater, and that's what the wings allow, and that they are hooked up to the air source on the scuba tank.
And when you first jump in the water, you want to make sure and have a little bit of air in that BC, or you could start dropping like a rock.
Go down real quick. That's correct.
Yeah, very good. And now you do cave diving. Tell us about the reel.
Okay, the reel. That's another outside of the air in the computer. Get it unhooked here.
You can hook it on me or something if you're looking for a place.
So the reel, what we will do with the reel is when we start a dive, we will tie it off.
Here, I'll let you have that.
And then we'll run the reel out as far as we may go, and sometimes it may be a dive. Maybe if I can steal somebody's hand, I'll stick out a hand here. What we'll do is
see if we can clothesline the members.
we'll tie off a couple points.
No kids are sleeping right now.
And again, on some of our cave dives or shipwreck dives, we may go literally, well, not a shipwreck, but a cave. We've gone 5,000 and 6,000 feet back into a cave system with no exit to the surface, with maybe 100 to 150 feet of solid rock above us. And at this point, you've got to have a reel. And certainly, going in and coming out, you and your dive team stay right on this reel.
You don't want to do the Hansel and Gretel where you put out the little fish crumbs and try and find your way back out, huh? So this is your lifeline back to the exit. Or you want to make sure you're locked in so you can get back out. And a Christian, I suppose, needs to be grounded so they can find their way back. We come to church every week, sort of attach ourselves and reel ourselves back, keep our bearings, right?
As I was sharing a little bit with Doug, there have been times where even though after an innumerable amount of dives, you can, in life, we get complacent, and I have left my reel hooked on to myself and think, I've been in this room before, I've been in this cave system before enough times, but the conditions will change. And literally get down and literally praying that I can find my way out.
Yeah. And sometimes dust gets stirred up in a cave, or you find some problem with your equipment and you think, I got to get out fast. If you don't have a line back, it can be fatal. Matter of fact, cave diving, I think, is about the most dangerous.
There have been some cave systems that I have gone into where they literally have signs at the entrance to the cave and it says beware. Over 180 divers, or whatever the number may be at those different caves have died in those cave systems, just reminding you, please take care of yourself.
Yeah, and some of them are still there. So you've got to be locked in to home base with a reel and be able to get out. Now you got a light.
I do.
On your shoulder there. Oh, that's good. Sometimes you're looking under the coral and you're looking for animals that might be hiding, or you might even have the sun go down.
Correct.
You're going on night dives, I'm
a
sure.
lot of night dives, and most of the cave systems and, of course, shipwrecks are a very, very dark diving situation. So having a light is almost, again, one of those critical tools. And depending on the type of dive that we may have multiple dive lights for backups.
All right. Now, I'm trying to think of what we may, when you want to, if you've got too much air, like this is your, when you want to let the air out, then you press, and that'll release it.
Correct.
Now, if I do too much of this, you'll probably be like wearing a corset right now, huh?
Yeah.
What did we forget, John? Oh, you got your weight belt.
Yes.
Bless your heart.
I didn't put any weight on it with all the other gear, but
when you first go in, now he's got a dry suit on. A lot of divers use a wetsuit, and that's like neoprene. It floats a little bit. So problem with that is you jump in the water to go scuba dive and you can't go down. So you actually have to put some weights on your belt, and there's a special way to wear this belt and make sure that you've got it on for, I guess this would be what they call right-hand release. If all of a sudden you've got a problem and you start sinking and you're out of air and you've got to get up fast, you quickly do this and you drop your belt. Don't worry about saying, oh, but it costs money, I might need to save it. You unload so that you can get up. And otherwise, and I've seen people go over the side and forget to check their equipment. Well, I'm going to talk more about what you've got here, but I don't want to keep you out here in the hot lights. You got your first, is this first aid or?
This is actually an important little pouch too. If I happen to lose if my computer died on me, I have a set of underwater tables that I can refer to my dive times and so forth, so I'll still know how to come back up, as well as I have a notebook, so if things get really difficult, we can actually write notes back and forth, or I can let a dive buddy know, hey, this is the profile that you need to follow underwater to keep you safe. And then a backup mask.
Oh, if you
have lost your mask and
can you imagine being in a cave and all of a sudden losing visibility and having no mask?
Then I have a mirror and know it's not to do your hair underwater. This is actually has been a very helpful tool many, many times. I've actually been in a shipwreck where a piece of metal perfectly hooked around the valves on my scuba tanks, and I got out my mirror, and that was the only way I could get myself unhooked. My buddy was behind me. It was such a tight space, he couldn't get up to me to unhook me, so I was able to look over my back and unhook myself. And
I hope your folks aren't watching this sermon. That's going to make them nervous. That's incredible. Amazing. I'm learning stuff as we go. And so you got a valve on your suit. Is that just let some air out so you don't bubble up?
Well, that's actually so you can go to the bathroom underwater.
I really didn't know. I don't have one of those suits. Okay, that's probably too much information.
Well, when you're underwater for maybe 4 or 5 hours in one time, we actually can drink underwater. We'll take camelbacks underwater with us.
You get thirsty, yeah?
And drink. And so hydration is extremely key when diving.
Absolutely. That would make sense.
And you can even eat underwater as well, too.
Yeah, sushi.
Well, I haven't tried that, but...
All right. Well, are we
else?
forgetting anything? Let me see. Of course, you got a valve here on your tank. I'll talk about that just in a minute. The regulator there. And looks like, you got some life vest or what's?
That's actually a lift bag. So if we're in a shipwreck where artifacts are being looked for, we can actually inflate that lift bag and lift an artifact right up to the surface. Or if we're back on the surface and we have a failure in our buoyancy compensator, we can actually use that as a life preserver.
It'll keep you floating.
It'll keep us afloat.
In the meantime. Well, bless your heart. Thank you so much. How many of you would like to say amen and thank John for coming out and helping us with all
Thanks
this today?
Having me today.
Illustration. Well, I'm going to talk about some of these things and see if we can make a few biblical spiritual applications. Now, the equipment that you're seeing John wear there is what you need to go down and to stay down. But some people do free diving. While we were on our vacation, we stopped at a little island and saw a gentleman there who dives for conch shells, and the conch snail actually. Every day he goes out in the ocean with this little rowboat and he free dives. That means no scuba tank, no regulator, doesn't have the buoyancy vest. He's just got a mask and a snorkel and some fins. And he goes down 60, 70 feet and he holds his breath, and he gets these conch shells. He'll hold his breath for 4 or 5 minutes down there. The record for the deepest dive, and we've got a picture of this gentleman, is I think it's over 400 feet. Let me read this to you here. William Trubridge, he went 328 feet, no gear, down, free diving did it in 4 minutes. He broke his own record, which was 315 feet. But that's not the deepest. With weights and fins so they can get back to the surface, the deepest dive by a woman, 524 feet. Now, you heard John just say a master diver. He's been down around 400 feet with all the gear. This woman went down without any scuba tanks, 524.9 feet. That's Tanya Streeter. And a man, Herbert Nitsch, went down 702 feet. Can you imagine that? The way they do that is they go down very quickly. They follow a line down with weights. When they get to their point without hesitation, they've got to inflate a balloon, like he was showing, and it shoots them back up to the surface. You don't have to worry about nitrogen in your blood because you're using air from the surface. But what happens is it shrinks your body to about half its size. When you get down there, it just really compresses you. You've got to keep clearing your sinuses. And it's not a normal environment. But if you take the right gear, you can make it. I'd like to suggest to you, being a Christian is not a normal environment in this world. You need special gear. You need the armor of God, whatever you want to call it. We're living in a foreign environment. One of the keys to scuba diving is you've got to keep breathing. A big mistake a lot of people make on their first dive is they go down there and they hold their breath because you feel like I'm underwater, I'm not supposed to breathe. And the idea is you keep breathing with your regulator so that you can keep your body gases at a normal level. And if you are diving with someone, you don't see any bubbles coming out, you start worrying, you've got to go, breathe, breathe. What does breathing represent for the Christian? Prayer is the breath of the soul. How often are we supposed to pray? 1 Thessalonians 5:17, pray without ceasing. I'm not a prophet, but I think I can accurately predict that everybody here has been breathing their entire life. Am I right? That's the way it is with prayer. If you're going to be alive spiritually, you've got to keep breathing. Luke 21:36, our Lord Jesus said, watch therefore and pray always, that you might be able to escape all these things that will come to pass and stand before the Son of Man. You know, if you go up too fast and you're not breathing and taking your interval stops, you get something called the bends. You ever heard of that? It's a nitrogen gas bubbles get stuck in your joints and it's very painful. And our dive master down there in Belize was telling us about a couple on their honeymoon went scuba diving. Man was a little out of shape. He didn't follow the rules. He got the bends, and they don't even know if he made it. But he was all crunched up in a kind of a seizure in the boat as they tried to take him to a decompression chamber. So it can be very dangerous not to breathe correctly and continually when you're in that environment. We need to be in an attitude of prayer always. Oh, by the way, the word scuba stands for self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. In case you ever wondered, we always talk about scuba diving. How many of you remember an old black and white TV program called Sea Hunt? A guy named Lloyd Bridges. His sons are still alive, Bo and Jeff Bridges. They were our neighbors in New York City. They lived upstairs from us on 81st Street. So we used to see Mr. Bridges when he was a young man. But everyone was getting their first look at underwater photography with those very primitive black and white programs back then. But that's what scuba means. Did you know that if you want to be saved, you've got to learn to do some deep sea diving? Follow me. Children of Israel had to go through a sea before they got into the promised land. Isn't that right? Baptism, no. So there's something to be said for it. God saves us through the water and through the fire. Another important thing, and you heard John allude to this, in diving, you don't go down alone. Once you get your gear on, they call it the buddy system. When you go down, and there's the Batchelor family, just a few weeks ago we were there. Sometimes I'd be buddy with Karen or Nathan or Stephen. We went on several dives. You got to make sure your air is turned on in your tank. You look at your gauge, make sure you've got 3,000 at least PSI. Sometimes people get so excited, they put all their gear on, they strap it on, you're thinking about so many things, making sure your mask is cleared and you got your flippers tied on right, and they go over the side and they begin to sink, and they go to inflate their buoyancy vest, and it doesn't work, and they can't breathe. They forgot to turn their air on. Very simple, very, very important thing. One valve forgotten. It's like pilots that turn off the gas valve. So before you go, you kind of do a buddy check. You look your partner over and say, your gauges are hanging, let's hook them up. Your vest isn't hooked right, things aren't straight, your tank's too high, you're going to hit your head on it. You kind of look them over, turn them around. Air pressure, you got air, check your regulator. You make sure it's fun, but you got to be safe. You check them, they check you. What if you're down there and all of a sudden you've got an equipment problem? You get hung up, like John said he did on a shipwreck dive. You need to have a buddy there. You know, the Bible tells us as Christians, we're to operate on the buddy system. When Jesus sent out the disciples, Luke 10 verse 1, after these things the Lord appointed 70 others also, and he sent them, how? 2 by 2 before his face. Mark 6:7, he called 12 unto them, and he began to send them out 2 by 2. In the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. When you're going out, you're giving Bible studies. I mean, you've even seen it, the LDS, the Mormons. How do they go out? That's biblical. Jehovah's Witnesses, there'll be at least 2 or 3 that come to your door. And when you're giving Bible studies, when you're living the Christian life, do you have a friend? Do you have a buddy? Someone, a Christian friend that will help keep you accountable? That you can pray with? That you can talk to? You know, we strengthen each other. And if you're witnessing and one is doing the talking or the teaching, the other one is doing the praying. So we operate with the buddy system. It's very important. Ecclesiastes 4, verse 10 through 12. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. If 2 lie down together, they'll keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? Though one might be overpowered by another, 2 can withstand him, and a 3-fold cord cannot be quickly broken. It's often true, people who kind of drift in and out of church by themselves, their faith struggles through the week, and sometimes they drift away. We need to watch for one another. One of the first big sins was when Cain told God, God said, where's your brother? He said, that's his problem. Am I my brother's keeper? It's not just his problem. We do need to care for one another and watch for each other. I was just thinking as we saw these blessed souls getting baptized, how exciting it is, and I'm praying in my heart, I'm hoping that they connect and make friends with people in the church, because it's a proven fact that those that build relationships in the church, they become more stable, more productive, more fulfilled. So the buddy system, I think I've probably said enough about that. We talked about the gauges. You've got to trust your gauges. I'll tell you how deceptive it can be. Several times when we were just diving with our friends and with our family down there in Belize, you get down in the water, and when you're in kind of an open flying environment like the water, it's really hard for you to just guess how deep you are. You might think, oh, I feel like I can see the top, bright day, clear water. It's deceptive. You think, oh, the top's only 20 feet away, and it's 100 feet away. And you think, I can just swim right up there. It's not near as close as you think it is. Or currents can be pulling you, and you might lose track of what direction you're going. You're having so much fun down there, you get distracted. You don't realize, I'm running out of air, and I haven't looked at my gauges. You know, you don't know you're out of air if you don't check your gauges until all of a sudden you go, and there's nothing coming out of your regulator. Is a scary thought. You got to have a buddy there who's willing to share. Of course, if they have no oil in their lamp either, you're in trouble. You know the story. So you got to watch your gauges to make sure, how deep am I? How long have I been here? How much air do I have left? You use more air deeper than you do up higher. Your air will last a long time if you're just kind of scooting around or snorkeling around by the surface. We've got gauges too, don't we? You got to trust the instruments. We got to check in on a regular basis. They keep those gauges, you'll notice, right out front, so you can constantly, a good diver is constantly kind of referencing their gauges, how deep. And you know what the dive master will do? He'll tap on his tank every now and then, he'll signal you, and he'll want to know how much time do you have left. And you signal, I've got 1,200 pounds of air left. You give him a signal. How much air do you have left? Because you got to fill up again. We run out of air too if we don't regularly recharge our tanks. One reason we come to church. It's why we have family worship. You've got to keep that air fresh and keep recharging the tanks. Neutral buoyancy. We talked a little bit about that vest that a person wears. And when you're swimming along, you first go in the water. If you don't have some kind of equilibrium, you either bob on the surface like a cork and you just can't scuba at all, or you drop off in the water and you begin to sink like an anchor. You don't want to do either, really. The idea is that you want to be able to swim along horizontally, go down by the control of your fins, gently go up. You don't want to make radical moves when it's coming up. And so you achieve neutral buoyancy by, you put a little bit of air in your vest and you see if you're floating. Matter of fact, if there's any kind of floaties in the water, sometimes you'll see little mites, little creatures. You watch them. If you see that they're going up or they're going down, that means typically you're rising. And you get yourself for neutral buoyancy. That's when it's a lot of fun. At one point, we don't have a picture of it. We have a friend that's maybe going to send us a picture. Oh, you see that picture? That's me with a turtle. I'm the one on top, in case you're wondering. That's it's a hawksbill turtle we were swimming. We had some friends with us that were kind enough. We don't have an underwater camera. They were kind enough to snap that, and they emailed us a picture. But we had this great big, they call it a bait ball. There was this cloud of fish that was 20 feet across, looked like millions of little kind of green iridescent fish. They were all swarming in almost a solid ball, and all these big grouper and other creatures were coming to try and feed on them. And I was able to swim right down, right over the top of this, and you see them just kind of partying around you. Oh, it's so neat. I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that feels that way, but but you have to, the only way you can do something like that is you got to have your buoyancy controlled. You know, the Bible tells us that. You know, God told Joshua, be careful not to drift to the right hand or to the left. And then you find here it says in Zechariah 10:12, so I'll strengthen them in the Lord, and they shall walk up and down in his name. I want your up and down to be controlled. We talked a little bit about the weight release. If you're off there in the water and you've got the weights on and you've got some problem, you've got to go up. This fellow in the picture here, he's wearing a normal weight suit. You can see his weight belt. I think I was wearing about 4 of those lead weights around my waist because I had a suit that was very buoyant. But if you've got a problem and your vest stops working, you're just going to start sinking. You've got to get that thing off. There's a verse for that. Hebrews 12, verse 1. Therefore, we also, since we're surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin that does easily ensnare or beset us, and let us run with endurance that race that is before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. While we were out on our dive, we went with a group of several other divers and went exploring the reef, and we went everywhere from 0 to 80 feet. I think the deepest I've been is like 110 feet. But, by the way, just trying to find a way to squeeze this in the sermon. I can hold my breath 4 minutes. At least I used to. I haven't tried lately. I've done it for 4 minutes and 10 seconds, and I've gone down 70 feet without any gear. I used to do free diving. So I love that feeling of being free. But the pressure when you're down there is so intense, you've got to compensate. You ever go in a swimming pool, you swim down, your eardrums start hurting? You get down 70 feet, you've got to know how to equalize for what those pressures are that you're at. You need a dive master if you're in a group, somebody that needs to be in charge, that kind of watches over everybody. And you've got to keep watching your dive master, because it's really easy to forget where you are and where the boat is and where the other people are, and people get lost and separated underwater. You've got about 100 feet visibility. You go to the surface, you start looking around for everyone, and they're underwater. It's hard to see their bubbles and where they are. And so you got to stay close to the dive master. And every now and then, you start drifting away. He's usually got some kind of a metal bolt, or he's got a crampon or something. He's got his metal tank here. You can't hear underwater. You try and talk to each other. It's that's all you can really hear. You can maybe do a real just a squeak. There's an emergency. But he takes this thing, he'll tap his tank in a very distinctive, loud chink, chink, chink that you hear underwater. And everybody turns and looks at the dive master, and he'll say, "We're going to swim over that way," or "Look at me," or he'll go, that means shark, remember? Shark. That usually gets everyone back to the dive master really quick when he does that. And so, who's our dive master? Jesus. You got to keep your eyes on him. There's a verse for that. It tells us in the book of Judges, Gideon said to his team, verse 17, "Look at me and do likewise. Watch, and when I come to the edge of the camp, you do as I do." The idea is you don't go shallower than your dive master. Sometimes they'll pull you down because you're going up too fast and you can get the bends. If you're going deeper than your dive master, he'll tap his tank and say, "Up, stay with me. Do as I do." As Christians, we've got someone we're supposed to keep our eyes on. And it takes an effort when you're diving to watch your dive master more than you think. Because when you're in the water, you got a mask on, and a mask gives you limited visibility. I mean, right now, you get this broad spectrum of visibility, and you've got pretty good peripheral vision, but when you get in the water, all of a sudden you close that window down to what you see through your mask. There's much more that you don't see happening around you than you do see. And you can have a shark 3 feet above your head. You won't see him. And so you hear the dive master, sometimes they'll tap and they'll say, and you go, "Wah!" And there it is. Matter of fact, at one point I was diving with Karen and the boys. We were on a whale shark dive I'll tell you about in a minute. And matter of fact, I think there's a picture of it on the screen here. Oh, shark, that's fine, put that up. The whale shark, yeah, I'll leave that there for a second. And we went, this was really, really exciting. We wanted to go dive, part of the reason, at the place called the Blue Hole. There's this deep blue hole, 400 feet deep. It's got caves and it's got manta rays and lots of wildlife. But the water was too choppy. But there was another dive we were hoping to do that's very rare. And there's only a few places in the world where you can find these fish, which are the biggest fish, not some of, they are the biggest fish in the world. They're called whale sharks. You don't have to worry about them eating you because they just eat plankton. And they live down 5,000 feet much of the time, so you can never really see them. But it's very interesting. After the full moon, during the Passover, when the snapper are spawning, these whale shark, what happens when the snapper is spawning, these whale shark want to eat the eggs of the red snapper. And first day that the whale shark's boat went out, people came back, they said nothing. They went out in the ocean, they had to pay the dive boat hundreds of dollars. Came back, they said, "We didn't see anything." It's kind of depressing. We thought, should we go on the whale shark dive? We really wanted to see them. Second day, boat came back, nothing. Full moon, right around the Passover. Isn't that interesting? These snappers seem to know automatically, 2 or 3 days after the full moon, they begin to spawn. And they form this big cloud. Next day we talk to a boat, we say, "Any whale sharks?" And we were having to leave now. We had 1 day left. And they said, "We saw one." Oh, we were so excited. That's a good sign if you saw one. That means on about a 2-hour dive, they saw one swim by. So we went out that day on a whale shark dive. And, I don't know, dear, how many other divers were out there? 50 maybe? There's at least 50 other divers that were in the water. It's a state park. They govern it very carefully. If you touch one of those whale sharks, $10,000 fine right there. Because you can swim right up and pet them. They're very docile, very slow. But you're not supposed, they don't want to disturb them because it'll scare them off and wrecks their tourism. Don't touch them. You're not supposed to go below 80 feet because they also don't want to drive them down where nobody can, even snorkelers can see them on a clear day at 80 feet. So you don't want to drive them down. So we went out there and all got excited. We talked to one of the boats. They said, "We saw a whale shark." We went out with our group. I got to tell you a story. This is funny. don't lose my point, whale shark. Keep the shark on the screen. Let me tell you a story. You know, bachelors go down to Belize. We're on the beach. We drive down this dirt road. We're out in southern Belize. They got this dive resort down there in the middle of nowhere. Karen and I think, we got away. We're out there, and this is an international kind of secret spot. People come from around the world, but there's not that many people there. We're on the beach. It's just Karen and I. You can see a few scattered people up and down the beach. This couple walks by. I've got my glasses on, my baseball hat, and the guy and his wife stop, and he says to his wife, honey, that's Doug and Karen Batchelor. Now, the funny part of that story, I won't tell you their names, but every now and then, Amazing Facts gets an unusually generous donation. And the office always calls me and they say, wow, we got a donation, really praise the Lord for it. And I like to give those people a personal call. We thank everybody, but it's not always practical to call everybody. And I had these names on my desk, and I'm looking at this name. And I said, I'll call them when I get back, because we were packing for our trip. Who do you think it was that walked up to us on the beach there? It was the people on the desk. I said, I was going to call you. And I'm sorry I didn't call them. Lovely people. We spent the day with them, and they took some pictures, went on the shark dive with us. But wherever you go, you got to behave. People are watching. So, I mean, what would you think? Who would have thunk? You know, you go there, and you're on the beach all by yourself. And anyway, so we went out, and we're in the water. And as soon as I jump in on the first dive for the whale sharks, and I was first of the family to get in, I got my mask stuff on, I hear everybody that was ahead of me in the water, and they're going, and I looked, and there I saw this enormous leviathan just swimming down deep out of sight. Well, by the time the rest of the family got in, it was gone. So we hung around in the water for a while, and soon we could see, they swam us over to where we saw this highway of fish down, about 60, 70 feet down. And it was all these snapper that were almost, you couldn't throw a rock between them. They're just a cloud of fish as far as you could see in any direction. The whole floor. We thought the seafloor was moving. It was all these snapper that were spawning. Well, that attracts a lot of other life. And you look down there, and there were big groupers that were eating them. They had other fish, other schools. I turned and looked at Stephen. There's this big silver jackfish. All of a sudden, this big swarm of them swam right around him. I look at him, and I think someone got a picture of it. We hope we get. He's surrounded with these enormous jackfish that are right there around him, and so it just attracts a lot of life. And I look over, I hear someone tapping their tank. Now, Nathan's my buddy on this dive, and he's a handful. You can keep your eye on Nathan. He's so excited down there. He's swimming up. I had to grab him more than once. But someone taps their tank. I look around, and there's a reef shark. And he's swimming. Oh, it must have been 6, 8, 9, 20 feet, something. It gets bigger every time I tell it. No, it's probably about 6, 7 feet. Swimming right towards us. And Nathan's looking around. He's looking at the snapper. So I kind of tug on him. I go, and I turn and look. He goes, there's a shark. It swims by, which we thought was really neat, but then it turned around and started coming back. But it was just curious. It kind of swam around us once or twice and then took off. But that'll wake you right up when that happens. And then we looked down. There was all these bull sharks there. Second dive. We went to the back of the boat. You kind of rest and decompress a little bit. You've heard that expression. And went back in the water and got out to where this seafloor of snapper is. And I was praying. I said, oh, Lord, we've come all this way. It would be so neat to see one of these whale sharks. I sure hope the family. We had another couple that was with us on this dive. They came down last year, $290 per person, American money, to go out for a whale shark dive. They paid $600 to go out. They saw blue water, came back, saw nothing. They're now going out again, hoping to see these whale sharks. I was praying they'd see something. By the way, we did not pay that. Our master diver that worked at the resort was a Seventh-day Adventist. So won't tell you all about it, but we got a really good deal. Anyway, so I was praying for this family that they would see sharks. So we're down there like Jonah praying. And not long after that, all of a sudden we heard someone's tapping the tank. And you look down at this sea of snapper. They're swarming all in and out of each other. All of a sudden you see them part, and there's this black hole. And out of the black hole you look and you see this tiger-like whale shark come up. They were all below us, though. This is not one of those pictures. I got this just somewhere else. And just they are so massive. You can read in the Bible, it talks about these creatures. Psalm 104:26. There the ships sail about. There it is that the Leviathan that you have made plays. Oh, we don't know what that Leviathan was, but there's some big creatures out there. And then after we saw one, we were so excited. We're all just ecstatic that we could see it because you're in the water with this thing. It is awesome. It is so big. It's got a breathtaking. Then we hear someone tapping again, and we look around, and there's another one. Then we saw another one, and one of them was like 40 feet long. And so you get in the water with a fish that reaches from like me to the screen, and its mouth's 4 feet wide, you start feeling really small. And they get bigger than that. They get up to 50 feet. So that was real exciting. And you can even read in Job 41 about the Leviathan. So, and then we got the shark picture here. This is a reef shark, so this is what was swimming by us. And you see the bubbles from divers there. Typically, sharks won't bother you in warm water because there's so much snapper and things to eat. They're just curious about people. It's when you dive where John Salas dives in the cold water. You got to be careful. But something else we found, and now I'm just kind of, I know it's been a stretch trying to make a scuba sermon, but just a little tip. We found the best vacations we've had, we've always mixed them with ministry. So we were there 2 Sabbaths. The first Sabbath we were preaching at a town called Corazal. They had a get-together there, and hundreds of people came. That they hadn't had a group that big in a long time. It's northern Belize, near the border of southern Mexico. Matter of fact, Pastor Mike and his family lived in Belize, just near there, near Progreso, years ago. And second Sabbath, we went down to San Ignacio. We met so many lovely people. And so, you know, it seems like the Lord blesses. If we go work for Him and you do ministry and you mix your vacation with that, you go on one of these Maranatha trips and you say, I'm going to build a church and we're going to see the sights while we're there. It just creates a great opportunity to witness, and I recommend that. Bible says, preach the word, 2 Timothy 4:2. Be ready in season and out of season. Jesus was resting by the well. Someone came by for a drink. He turned it into a sermon. So wherever you happen to be, it's an opportunity to witness. Just a few closing thoughts I thought I'd share with you. While we were there, we did a lot of neat things. How many of you have heard the world's going to end next month? And it's going to end a second time, the Mayan calendar 2012. Have you heard that too? So the world's going to end twice in the next year. Well, while we were there, we went and looked at some Mayan ruins. Matter of fact, the biggest Mayan ruins in the world are in Guatemala. So we drove over there and went to Tikal. Is that how you say it? And this picture doesn't give you even a snapshot. This city was supposed to be, about 64 kilometers square, about 50 miles square. One city. All over the jungle are these buildings that are overgrown. They haven't excavated a fraction of this grand civilization that rose and fell. Now, I'm not too worried about the Mayan calendar for the second coming, because we had a guide who was of the Mayan religion, and they have some really strange beliefs. And you know, we at one point were in a cave, and they said the stalactites, the Mayans said the stalactites that come down from the caves are the roots of a cotton tree. So, you know, if they're telling us when the world's going to end, I wouldn't worry about it a whole lot, friends. Anyway, Bible says, Daniel chapter 2, verse 21, He changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings or kingdoms, and He raises up kingdoms. It's amazing, that civilization, how magnificent it was, and it passed on. We went through the trees and went zip-lining through the rainforest. And that was a blast. Nathan actually, we did it upside down at one point. Karen and Stephen and I. They tell you how to slow down. You go zinging through the trees, and you're like 80 feet up. So it's a little spooky when you first take off. They don't have all the safety features that you have here. No helmets or anything there. I mean, this is Guatemala. And, you get up on this rickety platform and the whole tree's swaying and the ladder's swaying. But we did have a safety line, and they told you, whatever you do, don't put your hand on the cable in front of the pulley. You run over your knuckles. And they tell you how to brake yourself, because you start going real fast, and they say, press your hand down and you can straighten yourself. They give you this real quick lesson, and then they just go, boop, there you go. And I was taking pictures when he was talking about how to slow down. So on one of my first zip trips, I got all spun around. I knocked that poor guy over at the other platform like a linebacker. You ever heard of George of the Jungle? I did one of those. But so that was fun. But it made us think about how thankful we were that we did have a safety line attached. You not only had your pulley and you had your harness, but they had a secondary line. All the time we were climbing up there, we kept clipping a line on just in case the platform broke, just in case the pulley broke. You needed to have that backup line, that safety line. The Bible tells us that Paul was let down through a window in a basket. That's the closest I could get to zip lining in the Bible. And then something else we did that was pretty neat is we went kayaking through a cave. And this particular cave is called Mike's Cave. It's a cave that goes back miles underground with a river. And you get in a canoe, and they have lights. And they take you back in there. And while we're going back in that canoe, I think you can go to the next picture quick, Cheryl. This is the entrance of the cave. Beautiful, just beautiful spot. There's fish way back in the cave. There's fish in the river. They give you this car battery in your canoe and a hunting light, spotlight, and you're looking at the wall, bats everywhere. And they were telling us a story about one guy said he saw a fer-de-lance snake in the cave one time, which is the most deadly snake in the world. And then next picture, he mentions, and here's a skull. This is an actual skull. They had Mayan sacrifices here, and all these bodies up on the ledge they used to offer to the cave gods or whatever, the gods of the underworld. Then our guide said, want me to tell you what happened one time? I had a couple tourists in my canoe. One of them lost their balance. We tipped the canoe over. The light went out. And he said, here we are, a mile back in the earth, absolutely as dark as it can be. He said, there's no light, and the water's cold, and you got bats and fish and snakes, and you see nothing. He said, and I had to tell them, stay here, I'll see if I can find my way out and try and get help. Can you imagine being left like that? Well, he wanted to show us how dark it was, so he turned off the lights. Oh, I'll tell you, that's a pretty thick darkness. And I did a little experiment. He did that. You'd be surprised how bright a Casio watch light is in a cave when there's nothing else. That little light is enough to light your face up or light up the person. You could even see around the room when there's nothing else. It was phenomenal. The Bible talks about that. You are the light of the world. It might be a very dark world, but this little light of mine, I've got to let it shine. Amen, friends? Well, we're talking about scuba diving and going deeper. You know who was the deepest scuba diver in the Bible? Jonah. Yeah. He wanted to do some whale shark diving himself. And he found one. Jonah chapter 2, verse 3. He was swallowed, of course, by that great fish that the Lord prepared. He said, you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the floods surrounded me. All of your billows and your waves passed over me. Then in verse 7, when my soul fainted within me, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer went up to you in your holy temple. Could you ever be so deep that you're too far from God? So the Lord could hear Jonah's prayer when he was scuba diving at the bottom of the mountains. It actually says he was at the bottom of the mountains, and God heard his prayer. Will the Lord hear ours? You know, one more story came to me, and I'll close with this. In the second book of Kings, really the whole message about the sermon is I'm trying to inspire you to go deeper and be prepared. 2 Kings chapter 2, there was a spring by the city of Jericho, and the waters were bad. They were probably sulfur waters. They couldn't drink them. And they said to Elisha, Lord, can you do anything for us? He said, bring me a bowl and put some salt in it. So he brought the salt from the bowl, and he cast the salt into this spring, and he said, thus says the Lord, I have healed these waters, and there'll be no more death or barrenness from this spring. So the waters remain healed to this day. Now, does a spring begin at the surface, or does it begin down deep somewhere? It's way out of sight. How could casting salt on the surface heal what's coming from way down, deep? Out of sight. It's a miracle. That's how. And by the way, I've drunk from that spring of Elisha there by Jericho. You can still drink from it today. It's the main irrigation for the whole city. How can the Lord heal the deep problems in our lives? How can he get down out of sight there in those places we can't even see and work that miracle? We don't understand it. But he says he can do it. That salt represents the grace in the Bible. His grace can heal us at our very depths. Well, you know, I just was inspired by this trip and wanted to share a few spiritual analogies I thought about this week last week as we were down there on these various excursions. Batchelor's had a great time. We're good to be back and we're refreshed. But just wanted to challenge you to think about being prepared in this deep world for the things that may come. Sharks might appear. Oh, by the way, I never even mentioned it. You saw John talked about his knife. You got to have a diving knife. You know what they use that for? In case you get hung up on some old fish net, in case a shark comes around. What's the sword for the Christian? Word of God is sharper than any two-edged sword, and we need to be watching our gauges and prepared with our sword for anything that might happen. Well, you know, I couldn't think of any hymn that would be better for a message like this than Deeper Yet. What do you think? Are you all ready to go scuba for Jesus in this world and represent him?